What's up, creature designers? Welcome to another tutorial video. This time I wanted to share with you my process of learning how to render values and tones. So I've set up my canvas here to show you how I would go about learning from a reference image. I've chosen a skull because it shows a nice variety of darks and lights, and it means we don't need to be concerned with colour at this early stage. So I start out by establishing the main silhouette by cutting it. I've graduated my shades of grey into 9 steps, which you can see below. Now there's very little actual white in the skull itself, and there's very little actual black. So it's really the 7 shades in between that I use during this image. As I go around the image, I try not to sample from the reference image, but I try to pick a shade of grey using the colour picker and find the closest match to the one in my colour chart at the bottom. I lay down the general shape that I'm seeing of that tone, and then I compare my image to the reference image, and I sample from my image to get gradations that are in between the 7 steps. So as you can see here on the forehead, I started with what would be number 5, which is just slightly darker than the mid-grey. I painted it onto the forehead, then I sampled the forehead itself and painted over again. This gave a slightly darker colour. Then I sampled that colour again and used that to blend in towards the shade. So you can see here I've established the main features of the skull, the dark sockets of the eyes, the dark nostrils, and the dark areas between the teeth. My colours at this point are still working from dark to light, so I've laid in the darks at the back of the skull, and I'm progressively working towards the lighter shades. I'm working on the silhouette and the form here by trying to pay attention to where the transitions occur in spatial relation to each other. So I can see approximately halfway down the image is the top of the nostril, and halfway vertically or horizontally is the start of the eye socket. Now looking back at this now, I can see that some of my shapes and forms are out of scale with the reference image. So if I was going for a direct one-to-one relationship copy, then this wasn't very successful. What it is successful at is my use of tones and their relationships between each other to explain the form and how it turns on the object which we're looking at. So working on the eye sockets here, the brightest point is that tip, or the top of the nostril, and it's not quite a white, it's almost like a number 2. So for a reference point is I paint the other shades of light grey and dark grey around them. I go back in at this point with the background colour, cutting into the edges, sharpening up the forms, and trying to separate the edges. So it's always hard working from a reference image because it's only 2-dimensional. The best way to practice this sort of skill is to use an actual 3D object, but I don't really have a skull lying around, so I'm working with what I've got. Working on the nose area, I can see that mine is slightly misshapen at this point, and in a moment I self-crit this piece of work by looking back at the reference image and try to find the areas which my image is most different from. So I'm trying to find the faults in my image, which I can then go back in and work on a little bit more to get them closer. So this type of exercise, you can really spend as little as long as you want. I chose to spend just over an hour on this one. If you were to really go for a realistic effect, then you could easily spend twice that. So I'm highlighting to myself here that my lines on the silhouette are different shapes and my spacing is slightly off on the canvas in its placement. I created a overlay layer here because the contrast between my lights and darks wasn't quite well established. So now I'm just going back in with that adjustment layer that I've just done, and now I need to re-establish some of the forms that the adjustment of the contrast is highlighted as not relating to each other. So I hope you guys will try this exercise. It's very useful in the long term for building your mental image of how forms affect tones and how tones help forms read. You can see during this image, by the way, that I haven't zoomed in at all. My brush is a soft round brush on 80% opacity, and I sample from the image, my image, as much as possible, trying to compare them to the reference image visually. So here we're just noodling a little bit, re-establishing it. And like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Give this a go, share your results. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them in the box below. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks a lot.